Shadows, the horror movie heroes, by Clouds, read by Distracted by Books, Chapter 19. So, Nejire asked, do you think any of the big bad villains will be making a move tonight? I hope not, Tamaki shivered, but with our luck, almost definitely. I don't know, it's been kind of a slow patrol, Mirio pointed out. The three of them had been walking the streets for about an hour now. So far, they hadn't run into any villains at all. Mirio figured they must all be laying low and planning their next moves. It made for a nice, quiet night. Mirio felt his phone vibrate in his pocket and dug it out. Who's calling me this week? Everybody knows I'm busy during the exercise, even Sir. It must be a spam call, Nejire shrugged. Or a villain, Tamaki added unhelpfully. Oh, stop being such a worrywart, Tamaki, Nejire said. Answer it. Mirio shrugged and picked up the call. Hello? There was a long moment of silence on the other end. Hello? Is anyone there? Is this Lemillion? Mirio blinked in surprise, then grinned. Yep, you've got the right guy. What can I do for you? There's a villain fight at the toy warehouse, the voice hesitantly whispered. Come quickly, please. What? Tamaki and Nejire looked at him curiously, but Mirio just shrugged. Who is this? Someone who wants to help. The voice sounded young and was choked with tears. Please, they can't find out that I'm helping you. The kid hung up and Mirio frowned, putting his phone back into his pocket as he turned back to his friends. So who was it? Nejire asked. I don't know, Mirio answered thoughtfully, but I think we should head to the toy warehouse. Denki couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Maybe it was that crash earlier, or maybe it was the fact that Mom was still being hypervigilant. Either way, it was kind of creeping him out. There was a movement near the doorway, and Denki peeked out from behind a pile of boxes. A small group was walking in, looking around the apparently empty warehouse with suspicion. One of them, a balding man with a suit, was clutching a large briefcase with a number 8 emblazoned on the front. Mom grinned and poked Denki in the ribs. It's go time. What? Denki exclaimed quietly. But the hostage isn't the objective, Mom finished for him. The money is. We already have one unknown group here. Let's not wait for more enemies to show up. Mom leapt out from behind the boxes with Denki close on her heels. Izuku scowled and jumped into action as soon as the other villains moved. He'd been hoping that the villains would show up first and give them a little bit more time to prepare, but apparently they weren't that lucky. He exchanged a look with Shinso, and they both leapt into action. Izuku grabbed a gun from his side and saw Hitoshi doing the same thing beside him. They just needed to keep Electra from getting the briefcase for now. Everything else could wait a few minutes. Jiro saw what they were about to do and slammed her hands over her ears just before the two of them stood up and fired through the broken windows. Their aim wasn't excellent, but it was good enough that they were able to at least hit the guy carrying the objective. A few seconds later, he dropped both the briefcase and his token. Electra turned to look up, and Izuku and Hitoshi ducked behind the wall as electricity arced over their heads. Hitoshi grabbed Jiro's hand and pulled her along as they all started running. Denki's eyes widened as the air filled with paintballs. None of them hit him, thank goodness, but the civilian holding the briefcase went down in seconds. Mom at least had the presence of mind to throw some electricity at whoever was shooting at them, and the bullet stopped after that, so Denki assumed she must have hit whoever it was. He made a mad lunge for the objective, but the door slammed open with a bang and he stumbled. Everyone looked toward the door to see a villain with rose vines growing out of him standing in the doorway, looking at the chaos. The hostage in his arms looked terrified but unharmed, and Denki was momentarily relieved before he remembered that he was supposed to be the villain here, not the hero. He lunged for the objective again, but he was stopped as one of the vines wrapped around his ankle and pulled him back. He yelped when his electricity lit the vine on fire, and he scrambled back as quick as he could before the villain could recover. I'm going after the shooters, Mom yelled. You hold down the fort here. Okay. Denki nodded in determination. You can count on me. Mom smiled. That's my boy. I'll be right back. Izuku stopped in his tracks as he heard Electra yell. They're splitting up. Looks like it. Hitoshi nodded. And I can practically see the gears spinning in that big old brain of yours. So spit it out. What do you have in mind? Izuku looked around. Well, it's gonna take all of us. And he was cut off by a shout. Heroes are here! Everyone scram! Izuku grinned. Perfect timing. Electra hurried up the stairs and looked around. The room seemed mostly empty except for two boys at the far end. Those must be the shooters. She made a beeline toward them when she felt a dull stabbing pain in the back of her neck. She whirled around to see a girl standing there, and she started charging up an attack when a voice stopped her in her tracks. Do you know where your son is? Her heart rate skyrocketed as she whirled back toward the boys. The taller one had disappeared, and Electra panicked. What did you do to him? Nothing. The boy smiled and raised his gun. Yet. Electra couldn't move. Her heart was going 1,000,000 miles a minute, and all she could think about was all the different terrible things the missing villain could be doing to her son. She should never have left him. What if... She hardly even noticed when the young man in front of her pulled the trigger. By the time Mirio, Tamaki, and Nejire arrived, the villain fight was already in full swing. There was red paint everywhere that looked eerily like blood, and the air was full of electricity and vines as the villains hashed it out. Tamaki steeled his limited courage as he tried to figure out what was going on. The villain with the thorns had a girl tied up in his vines, so Tamaki made her rescue his first priority. He manifested some octopus that he'd eaten that morning with his right hand and a clamshell in his left. The kidnapper only took his eyes off Tamaki for a second to see where Mirio and Nejire were going, but it was enough for Tamaki to knock the villain over the head with the clamshell. The villain crumpled to the ground, and the vines loosened just enough for Tamaki to pull the hostage to safety. Denki was feeling a little overwhelmed. When Mom had left, it had been him against the Rose villain, but now it was him, the Rose villain, and 3 heroes. Yeah, not fun. Psst, over here. Denki jumped when he realized there was someone gesturing to him from the shadows. It was one of the boys he'd remembered seeing when they first showed up. The one with the purple on his costume instead of green, and Denki froze. Was he trying to help him? Come on, the kid insisted. We gotta get out of here. Do you want to fight these heroes? But Denki looked up the stairs where Mom had disappeared. My friends are heading to help her right now, the kid said, but you can't help anyone if you're dead or arrested. Denki gulped, but only hesitated another second before running after the kid, who started weaving around the boxes almost faster than Denki could follow. It took everything he had just to keep up. Calm her down, Izuku ordered. Now that she's out of the exercise, we don't need to worry about her getting away. Jiro nodded, and Electra gradually calmed down, blinking as her heart rate went back to normal. She blinked for a moment as she thought through what had just happened, and she looked at Izuku in disbelief. Did you really just kill me? I had to take you out early, Izuku explained simply. A pro hero is just too big of a factor to leave in the game. Electra nodded in respect. Smart. I hate it, but I can see where you're coming from. Now, the staff wants me to leave my token here, so she grabbed her token from her pocket and Izuku snatched it out of her hand. I actually need this. Electra frowned. Why? Izuku gave her a shaky smile. I really can't tell you. She crossed her arms. Why not? Izuku pocketed the token and gestured for Jiro to follow. Because you'd try to stop me. Tamaki looked over the hostage to make sure she was all right and then turned back to the fight. Nejire and Mirio had managed to subdue the other group that had been fighting the Rose villain, but the electric villain they'd seen earlier must have slipped away while they were all busy with the others. Guys, Tamaki yelled quietly. I think we lost one. End of chapter.